This is the Buried in Work podcast, where we share tips and interview experts to help you simplify estate planning and end-of-life tasks.
Welcome to the Buried in Work podcast, where we feature stories about industry professionals by and for industry professionals specialize in making estate planning, your end-of-life tasks, all of those transitions more manageable. And today I'm joined by Dana Diaz, who is an author of Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. She's got this story that is a very compelling story. And, I want to talk about, Dana, how this interacts with kind of the Buried in Work mission, what we're all about. But first of all, thank you for spending some time with us today. And
it is my pleasure.
And are you good? Like, because I see
I am
this
good.
and I think I need to flip to the end of the book here and be like, okay, and
Yeah.
where are you now? Can you tell us about where you are now before we get into, because if I launch right into, and what about probate? I think there's a real missed opportunity there. So please tell us a little bit.
It is very interesting. And thank you for that. Yeah, my first book discussed my 25-year-long relationship marriage to an abusive narcissist, which, at point A started with some things being flung across the room at me and some nasty insults and words, to at the very end, even after the divorce, me becoming autoimmune, developing a lung disease after living in fight or flight for so long, and 2 incidents of domestic violence in which he admitted in writing and in court wanting to kill me and having planned to murder me. So this is unfortunate, especially because my next 2 books coming out, one deals with my childhood, which was equally as abusive, if not more. And then the third book, which gives your answer. I'm good now. I'm happily remarried to a longtime friend who is a wonderful, a best friend and my gentle giant, I call him. So he's taken my life down a few notches, thankfully. But where this ties into this podcast, it's something that people don't even think about, even if they're in the situation I was in. But at one point where I was realizing that I am married to this man who is making attempts on my life, who wants me dead, who told the neighbors he is planning to kill me. We are at great odds. And for extra fun, we were in COVID, in the pandemic, shelter in place. So I can't even file for divorce because the courts are closed. And I am locked down in a house with a man who wants me dead. I'm smiling nervously because it was not a great time in my life, but it was at that time that I had to start thinking, what if something happens to me? What if he succeeds? What if he does something, makes it look like an accident? I'm found at the bottom of the stairs. I accidentally I needed to think about my son. I needed to think about my assets, because at that point I was, hiding assets and making sure to change things into my son's name and all this stuff. I was even planning my own funeral just so it would be easy on my family and my son. And when you're not working because it's COVID, what else is there to do but plan for the end of your life? It was a very scary time, and I can joke about it now, thankfully, because I am well along in my healing. But gosh, something that's very real, unfortunately, to too many people. So we need to have this discussion.
Yeah, and for people who are hearing this, I know that your story is not even, it's awful, but it's not unique or even unusual. There are a lot of people who deal with some version of this, something on the spectrum of this kind
100%.
of abuse. And I wanted to start with, are you okay? Mostly because I don't want people, if you're hearing you and me talk, it's like, I need to know that you're good before I can launch in, but also because I think people, we can all relate to those moments in COVID where we were so over-torqued and so stretched thin. Those moments really reveal who we are. And in that moment, who you were was someone who was trying to figure out,
survive,
an escape hatch, but also to plan and make,
yeah.
And since that's what we do, it's an unfortunate dovetail of, I wish we could have been there for you and helped you then, because it's just this, it's hard not to feel that drive to help. So for people who are in this situation now, or for people who never want to be in this situation, let's make sure they have the tools at their disposal, because between your book, between the stuff that we offer, there are tools that make this a little bit easier. And we don't want people to be planning their own funeral because they're scared, but we do want them to understand that the stress is real. It's hard. It feels hard because it is hard, and that there are ways in which we can make this a little bit better. Let me start with this. When did you realize that, in addition to the physical harm that you were in, the real physical harm that you were in, that there was also, because marriage is one of the most important legal contracts that we're part, like you were also in a legal, nest of thorns. How did that realization hit for you?
I mean, it hit me early, and I hate to say, even on our wedding day, I literally remember the wedding march playing, and I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing? Before I even walked down the aisle, what the hell am I doing? The word divorce literally crossed my mind before I even walked down that aisle. I'm on the arm of my stepfather in my gown with the whole thing, guests awaiting. They all stand up and the doors open, and here I come, and I'm thinking, we're getting divorced. Why am I even doing this? So the thing is, we all know what we're in. It doesn't get better. You think it's going to smooth over. Time will change things. You'll mature as people. You'll grow together. We only grew apart, and it only got worse. But realizing it, I think, especially after I became a mother, I think when you become a parent, your mindset shifts, and I don't know if it's just a mother thing or a father. I think it depends on the parent, but I think it's for both parents. In some way, you become protective and want to, you're supposed to do that, shelter and keep your young safe. And part of that for me was not just keeping my son mentally and physically safe as much as I could, because I was treading water all on my own, in my own right. But, when I look at it, and maybe because I'm a type A personality and I was also the household, income earner for the last 4.5 years of my marriage, because of course, being with a narcissist, he felt that he shouldn't have to work anymore, and that at 40 years old, he just didn't have to work anymore. So it was on me. And so I didn't know what to do except to maintain a life for my child. And so really my son was my driving force. I worked my butt off. I mean, I know your podcast is called Buried in Work. I literally buried myself in work because it was a distraction. If I was at work, I didn't have to be at home with this man. If I was at work, I was making the money needed to keep my son, have a roof over his head, keep him fed, keep him clothed, keep him in his school, maintaining whatever sense of stability I can maintain for him. And the structure was good for me as well, considering the chaos, that otherwise ran our lives. Yeah. So, sometime in that motherhood era, but especially when it got dicey. So, it was something that I started thinking about, because being the income earner in the house, being in charge of my son, knowing that everything in our life was on me. I carried that sole weight. I had to start thinking in terms of what happens if.
When you make that transition between thinking about what happens if to actually planning, you talked about hiding assets, you talked about doing all this kind of in secret. What is that? What does that actually look like? Are you meeting with attorneys? Are you,
no.
bank account? Like what is that? What is that environment? Because we talk about estate planning under duress. It's never a fun topic. best of circumstances, you're contemplating the end of your life or the life of someone else, and it's usually not a happy topic.
No.
But this is on the other side of the spectrum.
This is different. Absolutely. This looked like, so no, meeting with anybody would be, not a good idea, because when you're with a narcissist, the more extreme and violent ones, as I was, they have a GPS tracker on your car. They are monitoring your phone. They are monitoring your computer. You have to be careful. I couldn't barely talk on the phone, never mind text message somebody. So no, there was no meeting with anybody. I was very isolated. So I had to be very careful. So the first thing I did for me was I bought a little at Walmart, gotta love Walmart, bought a $50 handheld fireproof, waterproof safe. To me, it was if I have an opportunity and my kid will come with me, because you have to remember at this point, he was a teenager. He wasn't 5. I couldn't just pick him up and run. If I had an opportunity where I was safe to leave, what did I need to grab and go? And so it was, it was maybe the size of a purse with a handle, fireproof, waterproof. I hid the key, obviously, but in this safe, I kept our important documents. Mine and my son's are birth certificates, social security cards, passports. You get the idea, bank account information. I had all my passwords for everything, any accounts written down, any important information like that. I had an annuity that I had set up in my son's name. That way, I was the account holder. He was the beneficiary. That's how I had to hide money. I was also taking cash money. And as ridiculous as it is, even at 40, you have grandma sending you $20 for your birthday. So any cash, that I had, I socked it in the safe. I mean, at this point, I had been saving for 15 years. So I had a lot of money in there. Let's just say tens of thousands I had in there that I was socking away, because I needed to know. I needed to know for me. I mean, what's the biggest thing, especially I hate to say this happens to men and women, but a lot of women who are the child rearers, and typically the husband is the income earner, their biggest reason that they come to me and say, I can't leave because I don't know where we would live. I don't know how I would take care of my children. So for me, in my head, I needed to know that I could take care of my son, that whether it was putting us in an Airbnb for a month or finding a deposit, having a deposit on an apartment and be able to pay a year's rent in advance, I just needed to know we would be okay. So socking money away, all the important stuff, that was what I called my grab and go. I kept it hidden, but I moved it around. And, it's silly to think back now of all these hiding places, but you can't hide something like this from somebody that's always snooping on you. So it's like in the basement, you have the drop ceiling and you can move the tile and stick it over there, but you got to move it every now and then to make sure, because what if they find it and they can't get in it? Then the key is somewhere else. And I would move the key around. And sometimes I'd even forget where I moved the key to. So I'd have to think outside the box. And I mean, literally sometimes, and I'm not trying to be funny, but sometimes it was in my box of tampons, because I'm like, he's not going to go in there. Who's going to go in there? Another
it's
time
not funny, but like literally
No.
my heart rate is going. I can feel myself getting.
Right. And I would have to send cryptic messages I had a friend that I trusted. So like, I remember I moved the key to the safe. I have a box turtle in a tank in my office, and I hid the key at one point in the stuffing underneath her water bowl. And I sent my friend a message, the turtle holds the key. And it's a cryptic message, but she understood. And this is, I know it sounds funny.
Now I feel guilty for laughing.
Right?
But you have me now. I didn't feel guilty for smiling, because that's why I asked at the front. I was like, you're okay. And now you got me. I genuinely feel guilty for laughing, because that's funny, Dana.
It is. It wasn't
awful.
Then because I had to think, like, I'm hiding a key to like all my, like in my box of tampons, and the turtle holds the key. This was my life though. I was like a super sleuth.
Can you and that friend now sit and like have this moment and be like, can you believe that we had, like, is there some catharsis after all this?
Absolutely. I
Thank
mean,
goodness.
I'm
Thank
laughing now
goodness.
with you because
Thank
it is
goodness.
absurd. Yes. And I'm glad for it. But at the time, no, because at the time, literally, I'm getting chills. I remember her writing a letter to the courts on behalf of me that it wasn't about he's an awful person and this and that, but it was my friend and her son are in danger. He obviously has issues. We need to start providing services, mental health services and resources to people in this situation. Like, so, I mean, she was like an advocate and didn't even know she was an advocate. But, unfortunately, courts were not helping me. 3 times I applied for an order of protection after a knife incident, after a gun incident, and I was denied. So this is a situation where people really need to protect themselves. And when I realized I mean, the reality was that I'm on my own. I was basically told by our system, every man for himself. And I was 93 pounds. I mean, I'm healthier now. I was very sickly then. I was 93 little pounds, 5'3". Every man for himself. Like, what am I going to do? I can't even pull a trigger of a gun if I wanted to defend myself, if I knew how to operate one. So it was a situation where I just had to face like, okay, the reality is he might succeed. This might actually happen. So what then? If the worst case scenario actually happens, what then? And in my mind, I thought, number one, there's no way in hell this man is going to get a penny of my money. Or if he thinks, I mean, let's be real, watch 48 Hours, watch any true crime show, 2020. Oftentimes, the spouse is murdered because there's this big plan to cash in on some life insurance and whatever. So yes, without his knowledge, I was consulting with the life insurance company and making sure that my son was the beneficiary and assigning that particular friend, as the guardian over him. It was my bank account. You have to, most people don't even know with a bank account, and I'm sure you've had shows about this, but you should have some beneficiary, some assignee for your bank account, even just your regular checking account, that if something happens to you, that it doesn't have to go into probate and all this stuff, that somebody has access and authority to access that money. Well, that was my friend, and she knew very well everything would go to my son. Nothing was, if something happened to me, nothing was going to my then husband. And I made sure of it. And
well, thank goodness for your friend, because that is these are the things that really lift us up. I'm Jared Rizzi. Dana Diaz is our guest. This is Buried in Work podcast. And for the conversation we're having, look, we've established this is awful. And when you said every man for himself, what I can only hope is that your experience, the book, your experience, the obviously the advocacy role that you've taken to make sure this doesn't happen to other people, and hopefully the stuff that we're offering, the resources, we can make it so that there's a little bit of a safety net for people.
Yes.
Look, we're not going to change overnight the system of, the courts or the world that we live in, but we can make it so that people have, more than a box turtle and a friend to make this a little bit easier. And so I want to talk about some of the resources that you availed yourself of and some of the stuff that we have available on the website, or things that would have maybe helped you when you were scrambling, because this is a real challenge. Again, even in the best of circumstances, this is hard. We're talking about the far from the best of circumstances. When did you start actually you said it was really tough for you to talk to lawyers, accountants, whatever, you're low-jacked, you're being tracked, you're whatever. Like, all this is awful. Mm-hmm. When did you start actually making these legal changes, and how did that affect over time? Because I think about, we've got these checklists. You can look at buriedinwork.com in safe mode on your computer, hopefully. It's like, how do you work around these situations? And I think about, let's talk about assets, legal considerations. How did you start to actually implement the plan that you had worked so long and known about for so long in secret that you had to make those changes?
It was basically, I mean, I knew, like I said, I think when the COVID pandemic hit and I couldn't, I had actually spoken to an attorney about filing for divorce a week before the pandemic shut down.
My
So
goodness.
it was like, it was like the universe laughing at me saying, yeah, nice try. But I think that's when I realized, I mean, even the banks and everything were closed, but there was still some access. And even though I was controlled and watched, I could go to the bank. I could talk to the insurance guy, so it was just a matter of basically taking, we all have our like statements of all our accounts, things like that, and just calling and saying, my main concern was my son was a minor, and this was my biggest problem. My son is a minor. How do I ensure that he is the beneficiary for, I'm just using that as a universal term, but that he would get the benefit from whatever accounts I had anywhere, whether it was insurance payouts or checking account access, whatever. So it was just about that. So it was just a matter of calling each of these people. I had to do so in secret, obviously, since I didn't want to have anything tracked on my computer. And sometimes if they were open, I could go have meetings with them. But it was just a matter of filling out paperwork. And it was actually quite easy. I didn't have to get into my situation. I didn't have to get into the whys, because realistically, outside of all that, all of this should be in place. I now impress the importance. Even my son, who is now 21 years old, I say, you need to have a plan in place. You should make sure you have something in place with the attorney. Go to the bank and assign, he has a live-in girlfriend. They're talking about getting married. Well, you have to think about it. If something happens to you, who's paying that mortgage? How are we going to make sure she still has a house to live in and a car to drive? Yeah. You have to think about these things. So these are basically the thoughts that I just wanted to ensure that my son was going to have, as stable of a life as he could if I wasn't around to monitor and pay for it and be present. So I could not change custody arrangements because his father's alive and would have, that authority, but I could arrange everything else without my then husband's permission or signatures or anything for that matter. So that's what I did. I just called I called the life insurance guy. I called the annuity guy. You go through the process and you sign what needs to be signed. And there's usually every one of them had a form, and I filled out the form and returned it. Back then, we were still doing stuff by mail, even though the post office was not open as much. But, however you needed to get it, I could go to the library and fax something. I didn't have a fax machine. Who does anymore? But the library does.
Thank goodness for public libraries, though, because this is people really.
It is a safe place.
It really is. I think in the last few years, especially, people have been really turned on to look, this is just a place. This is a community. This is as close as we have in some places to a community resource center. So I'm a big fan. But it's macabre to ask you about, but obviously macabre is kind of our whole thing.
Yes.
Planning your own funeral, you're obviously not expecting. Nobody's expecting it to be a happy occasion, but you're thinking about this as like planning for my own funeral after I've been. I can't mince words. After I've been murdered, like. How does that look? What does that look like? Because this is, again, we provide these tools for best of circumstances. And
see this pink binder?
Geez.
It says, in case of my death.
Oh.
I bought this pink binder because pink is my favorite color. I'm a girly girl. And my son was told, if something happens to me, get the pink binder from my office. And when he opens it up, there is the first thing in here is a list, which I won't put it on the screen, but in big, bold black, attorney. I have all my attorney's contact information. And I wrote a note here to my son. Most importantly, know I love you more than anyone or anything. Always have, always will. Always remember that. And I made him a list of who to contact with phone numbers, anyone he needs to contact. My final wishes, I actually told him who to call at the church, name of the priest, the readings to read at my Catholic Mass, the hymns to play, what to serve food-wise at The policy for my life insurance is in here. Every account, everything is in here. So he wouldn't have to think. I didn't want him to have to think or worry. And I told him, honestly, I put another note in here saying, just hand this to somebody. If it gets too hard, just hand it to somebody. But I wanted it to be done. Sorry. My son is my weak spot, but fortunately we haven't had to use this, but I have kept it because I think it is still important to have. And, I am married now to a wonderful man whose family I've known 20 years, and he's wonderful, but I still have this because I think it's important now that I'm not in that situation. Imagine your spouse dying or your mother dying or I don't want to. You can barely think. You're just trying to get through.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I was going for with this binder, is that I don't want them to have to think about anything. I have my Social Security statement in there, who to call, where to go for your $200 or whatever it is, $250 Social Security death benefit, but I just wanted it to be easy, because I think the other thing, and I will say this honestly, what really opened my eyes up was, in my first marriage, my sister-in-law, her husband passed very suddenly in his 40s, just literally dropped dead of a heart attack. Very sudden. I was there with her at the hospital. I was there with her in her house when she told their 3 very, very young children that their father had passed. And she honestly had no idea. She said they never, even in their 17 years together, they had never even discussed whether, did he want to be cremated? Did he want to be? And I'm like, how do you not have those discussions? And maybe because I'm organized and I'm always overthinking everything, I'm like, that's something people should know.
Yep.
So in my mind, seeing her guess and not know how this all works, I just, like I said, I just wanted to make it easy. I'm not saying everybody should have a terrible binder. It is pink, though, in my defense. I mean, it's bright and happy, and it's not a happy project, but
no, there's something like deeply, both it's comforting and discomforting that it's bright pink. It's like, well, I'm gonna I laugh, but I think for people who are making these preparations, the letter you wrote for your son, the binder you left for him, that's what we're all trying to do. I mean, look, some people can't put in words what you were able to articulate so beautifully and in such pain, right? Like, this is, out of pain comes beauty, and like there's a real gift that you were trying to give him. But even if people are just, I know I come from a very kind of loud and hugging family where it's like, we let you know if we love you or hate you kind of thing. But some people come from a little bit more buttoned up kind of environment. Yeah. And like, they may not be able to express in the kind of words that you've put down there that deep. What comes across to me immediately is the deep love that you have for your son and the concern you have for his future. Like, that's obvious. People may not get that from a tidy will and estate planning and all this, but that's also a sign of their love. Like, this is another way to express that love. And I think for people who are on the receiving end of this or even planning this, like, just know that even if you're putting it out there and it's a little bit less pink or less flowery than what you like, it's still, this is still a way to show people that you love them, or that you at least don't want them to get hurt or burdened by the mountain of planning that you had to do. I mean, I think about, like, if in the best way, it's like, slowly take down a mountain. Like, you're the guy it's like Shawshank Redemption. You're like slowly doing it one day at a time and letting it out in the baseball yard. Like, this is hard. This is really hard, but I think it comes from that place of love.
It absolutely does, because like I said, my main concern was, I mean, if anyone died that was close to me, as I'm sure some people, we're all going to have this happen or have had, you're just trying to get through. But to think of all the details and who am I supposed to call and what am I supposed to do? And here I have what was he, 16, 17 years old. He has no idea. And I had to be sure that, and then even after the divorce, I mean, he always says like, oh, geez, mom. But even after the divorce, it was just me and my son. So it was like, okay, I could just be driving to work and get in an accident. At that point, it wasn't so dire like domestic violence, but the reality of you are a minor, I'm your mother, I'm the one that has sole custody of you and I'm responsible. If something happens, I need to know that you know that and to this day, he knows, like I said, that this binder is here. And every time even if I just go on vacation or go away, I still put up on the fridge a note and says, don't forget the pink binder. And here's my attorney's information and phone number. Just call him. He'll take care of everything, because that's who, just a reminder, because I think it is important just to have plans in place. And I think it's helpful if families, or at least couples, have this discussion. If it's just you and your kid, like it was with us, but if you have minor children, they don't need to go through, they're going through losing a parent or parents or whatever. They don't need the added stress of attorneys and probate and all this extra stuff. I just feel like make it easy for them. And yes, it absolutely is out of love. I just want him to live his life, get the money, pay the bills. I'm going to add one more thing, the paying the bills. I made sure all of the mortgage, all the utilities, everything was on automatic payments out of the checking account. Because I always told him, if something happens to me, you don't have to worry. It's all being paid and there's money in there. So you don't even have to worry about, oh my gosh, a bill is being late or the lights are being turned off. Just eat is all I told him. You just have to get yourself food.
Well, look, not everyone's as prepared as you. And I think, I rarely feel like I'm prone to this level of understatement, but that's, I guess my question at this point is, and this is Dana Diaz, her book, Gasping for Air, one of the 3 books that you've written, dovetails pretty cleanly, but unfortunately with a lot of the stuff that we talk about here at Buried in Work. I'm Jared Rizzi. And for people who are listening to this, it's not like being a single mom with a minor child, still a minor child, is also an easy situation. So when you finally were able to more freely meet with attorneys, meet with estate planners, do all these things and do it, I hate to say properly, because I don't want to dismiss or discount the hard work that you did in awful duress. But when you were finally able to do it a little bit more easily,
yes,
what were you able to do then? And then, of course, when you're married, I'm guessing you remarried, you did this again, right? Like you've revised. I'm guessing you probably have a little calendar. You sound like the kind of person who's organized enough where you revise on a regular schedule.
You figured that out, yes.
Like what have you, as someone who is, let's be clear, probably in the wealthiest 1% of knowledge about doing this and having done it, what have you learned that people need to know? Because I feel like what you've created under pressure and time is a diamond, and I want to show other people this diamond.
I think it's just having the knowledge that it should be done and actually enacting it. Because I think people talk about doing it, or they think, oh, that's something that like older people do, or I don't have to worry about that until. I don't care who you are. Like I said, my son's 21 and I'm like, you have to start thinking about it. Once you have assets, and I hate to make it sound like that, but I mean, divorce, it's all dividing financial assets. When you die, it's all about your assets and how they're distributed. I like to think, and maybe I'm as controlling as all the narcissists that controlled me, but I want to know where my assets are going. I want my assets to go to the people that I want them to go to. And I only have one child, so that makes it very easy for me. But I also have a husband now that I am participant in some of the household, financial responsibilities. So, between the two of them, they get most of the benefit. But yes, when you're sitting down with an attorney, they're going to say, okay, like for me, I'll speak to my experience. Everything you basically have, given to your husband and or your son, what if both of them are with you on that airplane and it goes down? That's what my attorney said to me. I know, I love my attorney though. He thinks like I do. then what? And so then I'm like, I got to think of somebody else. Like, but it's okay. I always have people I can
Who's the
give
chill
stuff
person
to.
in your friend group? I want to know, like, who's the one who really lets loose? I need to know. I have
That's my
10,000
husband.
questions that are not okay.
My husband blows with the wind. I swear. I'm the type A, and he is so far to the other side, type B. So somewhere in the middle, it all works out.
Okay, but I have to ask this because I also know that there's someone out there who's listening to this and they have a relationship, and maybe it's not contentious, but they have a relationship where one person is really engaged and a real big planner and does all the legwork, and they want to have their partner who is a little bit chill, not speaking at all from personal experience. They want them to engage a little bit more. How do you get that to happen after everything you've been through? How do you be like, look, I need you to actually read the document so that we can move forward with the, like, how do you make sure that your partner who is relaxed and groovy is also engaged in these really important things?
You just have to learn what speaks to that person. My husband now, like, yeah, he's very so easygoing and so chill, very quiet by nature too. I'm obviously not. But he likes having discussions.
Yeah.
And so it was just, it was easy for him because I said, let's go down to the attorney and have a discussion about what happens if something happens to one or both of us. And he agreed. He was actually very, he's like, yeah, I haven't updated my will in a long time. And as things are now, he's like, everything goes to my ex-wife and my kids. And he's like, oh crap, we are married now. I should probably think about, changing some of that and taking care of you. Exactly. But you know what? But fortunately, I mean, second marriage stuff, that's probably a whole other topic when you're talking about wills. But, he was very understanding. I mean, he just assumed everything. He knows I live for my son and everything would go to my son. And I would never want to take away from his children either. But, we worked it out, together where we are also considering each other because, again, we have financial ties now as a married couple and financial commitments and assets we own together. So we work it out. But fortunately for him, he does like having those conversations. And so, we have the same attorney. It worked out real well. You just have to open up that conversation with people. And sometimes it's just the knowledge. It's like my son is very receptive. I'm actually surprised. There's things I started telling him at 6, 7 years old. Cause I told him I know you won't be surprised by this. I told him when he was about 6 years old that the first rule of life is be prepared. And so I was always preparing him from a very young age with little snippets of wisdom. And I love how he's living his life as a young man now. Like I'm seeing it all come into play. So I wouldn't be surprised, but I will be that mom and be like, have you talked to an attorney about a will? Have you assigned a beneficiary for your checking account? You should at least do this. And so, I'm surprised sometimes he's like, yeah, I did do that actually. And sometimes he says, well, I should. And so it's just about getting the information to people because a lot of people aren't aware. Even my husband, he's going to be 60 years old and he didn't realize that he should have somebody assigned to his account with him, So just getting the information is the basic thing about it. And me, I like giving people that information. I'm not trying to be bossy, just a little aggressive with my helpfulness. But
I think everyone needs someone in their life like you, Dana, and I am grateful for you sharing that with us today because for everything else that we're dealing with, and between your story being hard, between the work that we do at Buried in Work being hard, like it's easy to get. I'm glad that we can have these moments of catharsis, and I also think about everything you said about like the autoimmune stuff. Like people don't realize that when the adrenaline stops, eventually your body does need that moment. I'm glad to see you on this other side. I wish that
thank you.
We had these things and we could have been there to make them a little bit easier for you then, because I know that there would have been some, I think about just like reaching down and pulling up because like you need that. But I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that you're at a point where you can have these lighter moments because
Yes.
I think we deserve them. We deserve them as human beings who are going through enough. It's a difficult story. It's a personal story.
If anybody listening, we all know somebody, unfortunately, who we think might be in a situation or know they're in a situation. Please share this episode.
Yeah.
Just, it's easy for somebody to listen to something on the way to work or while they're doing laundry or whatever they're doing. This might be helpful information for somebody. So please share it. Please, please, please.
So grateful for you to share it with us today. Thank you so much for spending some time.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you found this helpful, please consider leaving a review, following us on social media, and visiting us on the website, which is buriedinwork.com. Podcast listeners, you can save 10% off all of the products for Buried in Work's estate preparation package and games with the code BIW podcast. Again, Dana, this is just... It's great to talk to you. You've provided a little bit of pink.
Speechless.
No, you're giving me a little bit of pink in my life today, and I needed that. So
Oh, good.
I really
Good.
do. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Buried in Work podcast. Remember, you can save 10% on our estate preparation package and games with code podcast10 at buriedinwork.com.